Salvete ab Astrus, my fellow lore masters, and today we will be talking about a rather interesting topic that has been on my mind for a few months now. That topic being Fallout New Orleans. Now, this is my and many other people's idea for the location of the next Fallout game. But there are undoubtedly plenty of other Fallout 5 videos out there, but I'm just going to list my reasons on how to make Fallout New Orleans hopefully one of the best Fallouts. Firstly, and most importantly, the role-playing aspects. Arguably the most important part, though it depends on why you play these games. But ultimately, Fallout 4 is a role-playing game series, and from what we've seen, this is what makes or breaks the franchise. Don't get me wrong, I like Fallout 4, and it was my first Fallout, but after playing Fallout New Vegas, the role-playing aspects just aren't comparable, and if I'm being honest, Fallout 4's role-playing was a joke. We need the return of Fallout 3 and New Vegas role-playing. That means no voice actor, as well as preferably a New Vegas style leveling system, full of points to drop into various categories such as science, guns, and unarmed. Starfield has no voice actor, so that's a good sign at least. Another thing I liked from New Vegas was the ability to acquire perks from completing various objectives, like gaining bonus damage to a certain enemy type simply from killing a certain number of that enemy. It really makes what you do in the game feel so much more meaningful, and that you're not just killing more raiders because another settlement needs your help. Ugh. I mean, Fallout New Vegas rewards you for playing the game, which is just such a fulfilling feeling. Additionally, the faction reputation system needs to make a return. I don't think too much more needs to be said here. It simply added so much to the game. Fallout 4 did have somewhat of a reputation system, but not to the extent of New Vegas. And if I'm being honest, it was pretty shallow. Yet before we start praising New Vegas and hating on Fallout 4 too much, let's switch sides of the table. Now, we can't lie to ourselves. Fallout New Vegas' gunplay is not the greatest, and if I'm being honest, it would be pretty nice if we had the mechanics of the newer games, but also some of the weapons of the older ones, and maybe a few of the newer ones as well. A good mix. I won't lie here, so I'll just cut straight to the chase. I'm going to rant about a few things regarding New Vegas I dislike, and things about Fallout 4 that I like, because if we're talking about mechanics, Fallout 4 takes the trophy. Sorry, New Vegas, but you're just too old. Firstly and foremost, my number one pet peeve with New Vegas is the repair system. My god, it costs far too many bottle caps to simply have my hunting rifle stitched up, or my combat armor. Like, seriously, don't even get me started on the combat armor. 10,000 caps? Come on, Obsidian, I mean seriously. At that point, it's more fair to spawn in combat armor via console command than break my entire budget. That is my number one pet peeve regarding Fallout New Vegas, and boy is it a big one. Yet, after they just outright removed the repair system, which in my opinion is the wrong move, because games like Witcher show that it can be done right. Being most certainly my favorite repair system, it feels the most realistic and immersive, but Obsidian seemed to get it relatively correct in the Outer Worlds. That repair system was alright, in my opinion. But anyway, there are many other features of Fallout 4 that I actually quite like. The first being the weapons and armor modification systems. They, mainly the weapons modification systems, to be honest, added a nice amount of depth and customization that, to my knowledge, was relatively absent in previous Fallout games, certainly not to Fallout 4's depth. Next, and perhaps my favorite addition, though it is close, is Power Armor. In Fallout 4, though I've never played 76, Power Armor is great, and it completely changes the playing field in terms of heavy duty protection. I love the mods available for Power Armor, like the one that you can just like automatically receive a stim pack when you get below a certain amount of health, or the one that highlights enemies. Super cool, super in depth. I really love it. It's super cool. But anyway, I love the mods available for Power Armor. The look is amazing and badass, and there's a nice selection of heavy-duty weaponry to go along with it. Though there are some weapons I would like to see a return, such as the incinerator, submachine guns, or grenade launchers. I do love what Bethesda did with plasma weaponry in Fallout 4, as well as laser weapons, though personally I'm not a huge fan of the laser RCW from New Vegas. But it would still be cool to see it make a return. Regardless, I think both games have some pretty good weaponry that I could go over in a separate video if you guys liked, but for now, I think weapons from both Fallout 4 and New Vegas should be in Fallout New Orleans. And for the look of the game, specifically the menu HUD, I'm honestly picturing New Vegas, though Fallout 4's Pip-Boy was pretty well done, and I do honestly prefer it over New Vegas's, which is a tad clunky, though that is just due to age. The graphics don't have to be crazy, and if I'm being honest, I don't really care about the graphics as long as they're good enough. And if I were Bethesda, big note here, I'd take a note out of Rockstar's book and focus more on lighting, which has a much bigger impact in overall look. Red Dead Redemption 2 has proved this to me, without a doubt. I'd quite honestly prefer an interesting story, immersive characters, and well written or well thought out world rather than ridiculous graphics. Like, I want to be able to play the game, you know? Which is exactly what we're going to talk about next. We're going to go from game mechanics and such over to the actual world and what could be in store for us lying in wait within the swamps of Louisiana. Disgusting bloat flies, blood bugs, mutated snapping turtles, alligators, perhaps even gator claws, and giant snakes. Perhaps even mirelurks have made their homes within these swamps, or maybe there are strange creatures in the swampy waters that lie in wait for an unfortunate passerby. Piranhas or giant eels that feast on human flesh. Giant mutated bullfrogs. Perhaps even flamingos have migrated up from Mexico and South America. The list goes on. I am a stark believer that mirelurks in Fallout 4 are definitely some of the coolest we've seen to date. They have a very wild, animalistic, and intimidating feel to them in Fallout 4, which I love. And the kind of strategy they add to combat is really cool. How you kind of have to wait for them to come up to strike you so that you can shoot them right in the face rather than not just kind of bouncing off the shell and not really do anything. It's very cool. Strange government bunkers or vaults hidden away by the lush overgrowth of the swamp, simply waiting for the player to discover them and uncover their secrets. I can't wait to see what twisted experiments Vault-Tec has for us in store in the swamps of Louisiana. And speaking of lush overgrowth, this Fallout has the potential to be the greenest Fallout so far, which I think sounds very intriguing. With the lush plants of Louisiana, perhaps even being mutated somehow. Perhaps there are mutated plant monsters we end up running into during our adventures throughout the Acadiana Wasteland, which is what it's called. Also, say it's set in 2299, 12 years after the events of Fallout 4, at the turn of the century. This would give some good breathing room for the events of all three previous games to sink in, as well as further perpetuate the healing aspect that Fallout 4 seemed to be going for, and show that plant life is in fact still wildly abundant in warmer climates. Eerie occult secrets, not only hidden all around Louisiana, but within New Orleans itself. Perhaps there are strange covens of witches that we find every now and then. Or maybe they are a small time faction, similar to the Gunners or the Children of Adam. Perhaps they believe in Adam themselves and they just have a different perspective on his glow, or have found out how to harness more of his power. Picture scrolling through the forest on a gloomy day or a dark night and stumbling upon these witches mid-ritual, all gathered in a circle reciting an eerie chant. Or in New Orleans, you happen upon a house within the city filled with tarot cards, skulls, candles, and all sorts of occult objects. This game could be very interesting for Fallout 4's occult side, and to be honest, I think it should be one of the larger focuses of the game. Perhaps even one of the more important characters is secretly a witch or a follower of the occult. Perhaps we even get a follower who's a witch. The previous Fallout games have already dabbled into the occult quite a bit. Why, with a Lovecraftian god being worshipped in Dunwich Boars, the Children of Adam Vision Quest on Far Harbor, the Wendigo and Mothman of Fallout 76, and we sure can't forget the Stones in Fallout 76 as well. These are just a few examples of Fallout's darker occult side, which is why I believe a much deeper dive is warranted in Fallout New Orleans. And no, it shouldn't be called New Orleans or Greater Orleans or something like that. Just New Orleans is fine. Honestly, folks, I could go on for hours about the possibilities of this game, so before I get too into it, let's move on. Real quick, before we take too much of a deep dive into the local lore and the region's factions, I want to talk about Bethesda possibly adding their own factions or changing up the lore a little bit. Personally, I think the factions of Louisiana are pretty cool, and I would hate to see them go. However, there is one faction that would probably make a very small appearance, though I don't think they would play a full-fledged role in the game. The Brotherhood of Steel. They would most certainly have sent recon teams to the Acadiana wasteland to retrieve interesting technology, but beyond that, I honestly don't see them making an appearance due to the fact that in the lore, they have absolutely zero presence in the southern states. But I think it would be pretty cool if we got another good old-fashioned Lost recon mission, similar to New Vegas's or 4's. Just a thought. Now, let's get on with the factions of Louisiana. Believe it or not, there is some amount of lore within the Fallout version of Louisiana, though pretty much all of it is post-Great War. There exists a faction based out of New Orleans, known as the Royaume, whose goal it is to pacify and resettle all of Louisiana. And keep in mind, in the lore, all of New Orleans is apparently controlled by the Royaume. The entire city, as it was reportedly attacked by Swampers in 2268. Swampers are essentially raiders that live in swamps and are incredibly inbred. So basically, this would be the first full city we get in Fallout. Not like the New Vegas Strip. Oh no. All of New Orleans has been taken under control by a powerful and capable faction. Interesting. They are a monarchy headed by the royal Devereux dynasty that is actually quite recent in Fallout lore, the first of the family, Jerome Devereux, being born in the year 2222. I'll give you an idea of what this faction is all about by reading their wiki page, so here we go. And I quote, From out of New Orleans comes an army, bringing order and civilization to the hellish bayous of Acadiana, for God and King. The grandeur of the Royaume's aristocrats and the omnipresence of their Gendarmerie forces in the Big Easy gives many merchants the impression that the Royaume is a monolithic force in southern Louisiana. This is just the image the kingdom's creator and architect, the ever-masked Gendarmerie Director General James St. Just, wants to perpetuate. End quote. If there was, and hopefully is, a Fallout game in Louisiana, I'm getting more of a New Vegas kind of vibe from this game, where there's one big faction, the Royaume, that's trying to expand their sphere of influence and restore civilization to Louisiana, only opposed by unorganized raider gangs, loosely spread out throughout the Acadiana wasteland, the most powerful of which being Baton Rouge, a raider gang that took over and named themselves after the neutral town of Baton Rouge, a trading post from which travelers would pass through, or a place where those wishing to avoid the Royaume could settle down quietly. Until the raiders took over, of course, led by General Haddock. The once quiet town has now turned into a harsh police state that puts down anyone threatening the peace. Despite these unorganized raider gangs presenting little resistance for the Royaume, there is one group of outcasts and delinquents that has been putting up a pretty good fight since 2256. I present to you the Courts of the Bayou, by far my favorite faction. These guys are pretty damn cool. Made up of pirate swamp raiders, the Court of the Bayou is a well-organized, democratic coalition of pirates who rely on guerrilla tactics as well as their knowledge of the swamp to strike at targets, then use their boats to swiftly avoid pursuit. The faction was founded by John Samuel Harding, a charismatic and educated man, and a pirate at that, who operates within the Louisiana Bayou. His goal through founding the faction is to destabilize the Gulf Commonwealth, which is composed of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, and hopefully cause enough chaos that they'll incite a civil war between the states, and all hell will break loose, leaving the Court of the Bayou as the only organized force left standing. Its founders are 5 pirate chieftains: Samuel Harding, Enrique Moraton, Katrina Gooding, Max Savage, and Dylan French. They certainly sound like all very interesting characters, all of which Harding had to journey to Texas to retrieve them. Their democratic government was quickly established by 2257, and the town known as Old Tortuga was named their capital. At first I wondered if it was the island known as Tortuga in the Pacific, but unfortunately it doesn't look like they're Caribbean pirates. Just plain old swamp ones. Though it would be really cool if Bethesda implemented some sort of Caribbean DLC for Fallout New Orleans. I think it would fit perfectly with the game's style, and presents an excellent opportunity to explore the Fallout world outside of the USA, as well as expand on Fallout's oceans, something fans have been itching about for a long time. And actually, I believe there was a cut mission for Fallout 4. I believe it was called like 12 Leagues Under the Sea or something, where you were supposed to basically engage a hostile unknown entity within like the Chinese submarine. So that would have been really cool, but unfortunately we don't get that, which is a huge shame. But anyway, put aside the Court of the Bayou and the Baton Rouge, the Royaume of Louisiana is pretty much completely unopposed. There's no big faction rivalry like the Legion and NCR, the Brotherhood and Enclave, or even the Brotherhood and the Institute. I suppose it's more comparable to the Institute and Railroads relationship in Fallout 4. You have a big, scary figure asserting its dominance in a region, with a smaller resistance faction fighting back. Though, according to the wiki, The Court of the Bayou is no small force, and in fact, a force to be reckoned with, according to lore. So, overall, now that we've examined the lore of factions within this region, it seems to me that if there is a Fallout game here, we'll get a pretty unique circumstance of factions, unlike any we've seen in previous Fallout games. We have the Royaume, a French monarchy complete with a court, nobles, as well as chevaliers, which is concerned with order, civility, law, and politics, as well as religion. They seem to be Christians, actually, which is super unique for Fallout. I don't think we've had a Christian faction at all, let alone a monarchy, other than the Legion, which is more of like a tribal kind of thing. Not as put together, I suppose would be the word. So they're pretty much medieval France, but in post-apocalyptic Fallout, Louisiana. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty fucking cool. Next, we have the Court of the Bayou, a democratic nation-state of pirates bent on causing as much chaos and disorder as they possibly can, so that they may be the ones to come out on top. They may not have the Royaume's numbers, but they certainly know the swamps and seem to be expert guerrilla fighters, making them a deadly opponent in the bayous of Louisiana. Quite similar to the golden age of piracy, with Captain Jack Rackham, Edward Teach, known as the infamous Blackbeard, Charles Vane, Bartholomew Roberts, and of course the much-loved Anne Bonny, who all came together to establish the Republic of Pirates on the island of Nassau in the early 18th century due to the Ucra de Lima sinking off the coast of Florida, a Spanish treasure ship that was absolutely packed with gold. We're talking the modern day equivalent of billions of dollars, which is what spiked this golden age of piracy in the first place, as short-lived as it was. But I regress. I'm getting wildly off topic. The golden age of piracy is an age of history that I absolutely love and am sort of obsessed with, if I'm going to be honest with you. But I love the callbacks to real-world history the lore is making in Louisiana. Medieval kingdoms, golden age piracy, it all sounds incredibly intriguing and would make for a very unique atmosphere for this Fallout game. One rather unique opportunity for this game is music. Not only could you have classic 50s, but you could also have jazz, country, maybe a little bit of that banjo in there or some blues. We have to have blues. I mean, come on, it's Louisiana. Or on the flip side, even throw in some Confederate music, given that it is the Deep South. Perhaps we encounter, well, some interesting characters throughout the Acadiana wasteland. Perhaps there's even a faction of Confederate Southerners meant to serve a similar role to that of Caesar's Legion in Fallout New Vegas. Or perhaps they're a little bit smaller, similar to the Gunners. And to be honest, there's no such faction in Louisiana. But Mississippi, oh boy, here we go, folks, buckle in. Because this faction may be just the most radical faction we've seen in all of Fallout lore. More so than Arthur Maxon's Brotherhood of Steel, or even Caesar's Legion. And yes, I'm dead serious. So please, if you're easily offended, click off from this video, or take everything you're about to hear with a grain of salt. Because remember, this is just Fallout lore, and these guys are the bad guys. I present to you the Klansmen Confederacy, a well-organized, powerful faction based out of Mississippi, and a member of the the Gulf of the Commonwealth, made up of the states of which I mentioned earlier, two of which we haven't talked about, those being Alabama and Florida. These guys are pretty radical, and unlike Caesar's Legion, they are much more organized and not a mere conglomeration of 86 tribes. Not that that's a bad thing, of course. They are well armed, and as it happens, many communities outside its borders depend on its milita and merchants for their protection and financial gain. So yeah, basically these guys, they know what's up. They have their shit together. But Hydra, why are you making such a big deal? So far, they just sound like any other Fallout faction. Yeah, well, here's the nasty part. They're white supremacists, as well as mutants haters, and are most certainly a product of the pre-war and real-world Ku Klux Klan, based out of the American South, given that they literally share the same flag. To be quite honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if Bethesda would end up outright removing this faction from the game, simply due to its radical views, and I would completely understand their decision to do so. It's a little bit crazy. But I suppose they could serve for a pretty interesting villain, a pretty cool villain, similar to Caesar's Legion. But those guys are located in Mississippi, not Louisiana. And to be honest, this is just me fishing for a big, bad, interesting villain to oppose the Royaume. But for now, we're all out of luck, and we're left with still a fairly interesting scenario of French monarchy versus pirates. A little bit less of a black and white dichotomy that certainly leaves faction choice and interpretation more up to the player, allowing them to decide who's the big bad guy faction. And to be honest, I kind of prefer this because I kind of prefer this more because the Court of the Bayou is, if it's anything like the Republic of Pirates, they've created a free state of men and women resisting against the overlooming influence of the Royaume and not simply greedy pirates lusting for golden caps. Hopefully. But for now, that's just one man's humble opinion. What do you think of the Royaume? Or how about the Court of the Bayou? Which faction do you prefer? Do you like the idea of a green Fallout? Perhaps it should be set in the early 24th century instead of sticking with the 23rd. Have any ideas that you thought I missed? I'd love to hear your feedback below in the comments. If you want me to dive deeper into the Gulf Commonwealth lore, be sure to let me know, or any other Fallout lore, or any video that you'd like to hear from me. I love hearing your ideas. And it seems these videos are getting longer and more detailed each time I make them, which is just how I like them. So, I will most certainly see all of you in the next video. Wind guide you.